Lighting adds so much to the scene. Besides just lighting the scene, it adds mood, it adds environment. It also helps the textures look realistic or pseudo-realistic, depending upon what you're going for. The basic light you can add is Arnold Lights Skydome Light. And just hitting render, under Arnold Render, you'll get this very clean looking scene. With the skydome selected, going to the color right here and clicking on the input, connect a file, click the folder icon, and choose an image. Now when you render, you get this whole other mood happening. Much different than before. Take a snapshot. Break the connection to the skydome light by going here, right click, break, pick a new color, and render the image again. Take a snapshot of that, and you could compare these two side by side. Snapshot icons right down here. So skydome light, besides adding a background, we'll get rid of that in a second. Really, the skydome light with an HDRI image adds the mood and the look to your materials. To make the background not render, go into the skydome light, scroll on down to camera, and just set that down to 0. I'm going to reconnect the background, going into color, file, click the photo icon, connect the background, and even though it's in the viewport, when you look at it after you render, and to take a snapshot of this one, just click right here, that camera icon. Now you can compare the different snapshots. To add mood, you need to use different lights. And the first light that will be used is the point light. First, I'm going to select the skydome light, and let me click stop. And I'm selecting the skydome light. And for the intensity of the background, I'm going to tone it down a lot. Let's say 0.25. I'm going to take a snapshot of this. So at 0.25, you can see it's a much darker image. You'll make it a much darker image to allow the lighting in the scene to do its job. You need the skydome light to get that extra stuff that's happening, like right here. That reflection from nothing that's really behind the scene, but that reflection comes from the skydome light. And this adds to the mood, the environment of the scene. So even though skydome is not rendering the scene, it might be in your way. Maybe you don't want to see in the scene. Go under the attributes for the skydome, and under its scale, with the skydome selected, for scale, set it down to 0 by 0 by 0. This way it's a teeny tiny skydome. I'm going to push it below right here. It'll still render just like before. Now it won't be in your way. I'll take a snapshot of this one, and the before, and now you can see there's no difference. Scaling the skydome down to 0 by 0 by 0, it won't be in your way as you explore your scene. On to the first light, and the first light will be a point light. Go to Create Lights, and the first one is going to be this point light, which is this little dot that will emit light 360 by 360 all the way around like a light bulb. In order to see this light effectively when rendering with Arnold, let me get this opened. You can start to see that the light is affecting the scene right here. To get more shine, more brightness when using Arnold, select your light, and under its attributes, go under Arnold, click open this accordion area, and for exposure, start out with a number like 5, and this really depends upon the scale of your scene. So you can see 5 really is good enough. If your scene had a larger scale and the light was further away from your object, you might try 10, 15, or 20. Experiment with the scale of your scene and exposure to get the light just right for what you're trying to do. I'll push this light behind my object. Let me stop this preview rendering, clicking that, giving me an opportunity to move this light right behind here. Because what you're going for is some type of mood. And I'm going to set my exposure down to maybe 2. I'm going to duplicate this light, shift and just drag, and shift and drag. And let's look at the preview. Well, the preview has it as a little bit too lit. Let me set this back down to 0 for each one of these lights. And an easier way to select the lights is in the outliner. Select the light in the outliner and set it down to 0. 0 by 0 by 0. And I'm going to select all 3 of these lights. I'm going to just push them into this little pocket that I created right here. And I created that underneath this object. And the goal is to, again, create some type of mood. So my light will be coming from below. Since the light's coming from below, I have to make sure it doesn't go through the pocket. I'm going to push these a little bit further back to give it some space. Now let's take a look at this little environment. So there's some interesting things happening. To get rid of the speckles, though, in case you're wondering about that, you'll do that under your render settings. And under Arnold Renderer, under Adaptive Sampling, click on Enable, and under Clamping, click those under the camera AA, increase it to a higher number. For my I'm going to switch to GPU rendering. And going back under Arnold Renderer, for my camera AA, I'm going to use the number 10. And I'll wait a little bit for everything to render. Adjusting those values gives a sharper image, but that's not going to be good for this interactive trying to preview light moment that you're trying to create right now. I'm going to unenable, switching back to CPU. I'm basically doing that because the microphone and the rendering, they clash. Setting the number down to 2. And uncheck clamp samples. Since you know how to correct these little fireflies on the image, we can move on to just focusing in on lighting. And maybe for my render settings actually, since this first moment is just about focusing in on lighting, I'll just set all these values down to 1 to get the quickest image out of this preview. And then I'll increase it later. Selecting these lights, I'm going to move them a little more further to the back. Then adjust the light intensity because the lights are still a little too bright. Maybe 0.5 for all the lights. 0.5 for all the lights. And now I'm going to pick one of these lights. I'm just going to clone it and reuse it. So shift drag. Let's have some fun with this light. Put it a little further back. And behind the target itself. If you don't like the color of it, maybe I want this to be red. I'm going to duplicate the light by shift dragging and shift dragging again. I'm going to select this last light and just move it forward and change its color back to white. And I'll bring it a little higher up where it might be on a real pinball machine. A little further back. Just lighting that target. Shift duplicating this light again. And all 3 times, and I'll move it so it's in front of the target. Just trying to light the scene, create this mood. Let me bring this one forward and center it. So with these lights, and how many lights are there? There should be about 9 of them right now, besides the skydome. 1 through 9, and the skydome light. Let's take a look at this in a higher resolution. So go into render settings, set these numbers to 3, and then close render settings. Take a snapshot of it, and we started out here, and now we're here. So all these lights help to add to the environment that's being created. Let's add another type of light. Go into create lights, and this time it's going to be a spotlight. And the spotlight is a cone. Here it is. I'll show you how to adjust it very easily in a second. You can rotate this cone downward to point at the target. Let's say you wanted this cone light to really just focus in on that red ball in the scene. A good way to do this is selecting the object, go to Panels, look through Selected. And now we're seeing what the light is pointing at. And if you want it to point at the pinball, just hold down the Option or Alt key and left mouse button, just like you would navigate the regular perspective viewport. Option or Alt middle mouse button is to pan, and Option or Alt right mouse button is to zoom. This gives you an interactive way to position a light such as this. When you're done positioning the light, go back to Panels, Perspective, and switch back to your perspective camera. Let's take a look at the scene, and just like before, we might have to increase the exposure. First, take a quick look. You can start to see a ringlet of light right here. Select the light again. Increase the exposure of this light. Set to 10. And then turn back on the Arnold render view. Wow, that's a lot of light, so 10 is too much. Let's try 5. That's a lot better. How about 2? You might like 2 or adjust the exposure as you want. If you don't like this extra ringlet happening on the board, that could be controlled by going to Windows, Relationship Editors, and go to Light Linking. You could choose Light Centric or Object Centric. Light Centric will put all the lights on the left side. Object Centric will put all the objects on the left side. I'm going to select Light Centric, and on the left side are all the lights. You can select the spotlight, and it shows everything that the spotlight affects. If you want to exclude objects, just click on those objects. I'm going to leave the play field on, and then I'll flip it so it only shows the pinball. When you're done with this, I reselected the play field because I accidentally deselected it. And now when I render, the ball won't have light on it, but the play field will. It's going under Arnold, Render. So now this ball has none of that light on. Now I wanted the reverse. I'm just giving a demo how this light relationship works. Let me take a snapshot of this. So this is the current view. And now I'll reverse this effect. Click on Stop. Go to the Relationship Editor again. Unclick Playfield 1. Select the ball or whatever objects. If you want the ball and playfield lit up, just hold down the Control key. In this case, just the ball. And go back under Arnold Render. Now you can see the spotlight is lighting the ball, but nothing else, because under Relationship Editor, that's the only object selected. Go close the Relationship Editor. You can now increase the exposure, setting it back to 5. Light is hitting the ball, and the ball is then adding light to the scene through its reflection. I'm setting the exposure back to 2. My interactive rendering is off for the moment. Let me push the ball a little closer to the play field. Right now it's sitting a little bit higher up than it should. Simple point lights and a spotlight adds a lot, along with the skydome light set to very low intensity with an image casting an environment into the scene creates a mood. The final thing I'm going to do is light up a texture. I'm going to light up these little circles after I show how to light up things in general. I'm going to reposition the scene. Selecting this texture right here, and then going to the shaders property and go down to emission. Set the emission color. Let me hit interactive preview. And even though I have a color that it's going to emit, you need to wait in order to see anything. But when I increase the weight, it's not giving me a cool effect such as casting the light from this texture around. Let me stop the interactive preview for a moment. To the color, instead of just using a generic color, connect it to the file of that texture, or whatever texture you're using, and I called mine Bumper. Clicking back on this object again, going to its shader properties, going back under emission, and I'm going to increase the emission. You could see this light up in the scene preview. I'm going to go a little less than 1. Click on your IPR rendering, Arnold, and this will help light up the scene. If there was no lights in the scene, by selecting all the lights, pressing H to hide, and including the skydome light, this is adding a little bit light to the scene. Selecting this material for its weight, setting it to 0.2. This way it glows a little bit and it won't ever be totally in the dark. To turn back on all your lights, select them in the outliner, and go to the display menu and select show selection. Based upon the same idea, I want to light these targets down on the play field. I'm going to take a snapshot, take a snapshot to refer back to, and close this up. You could create a mask in order just to get the play field to happen. In order to light up particular objects on the board, I created an image of the play field where I blocked the background and I turned off a layer. And so anything that appears in color on this layer will be lit up, and anything that doesn't appear won't get lit up. If I want to turn off some of these targets to be lit, maybe I want to turn off this one, and also this one, and let's say this one as well. Just turn them off in your Photoshop document. I'm going to save this out, File, Export, Save. It's going to be a PNG file. You could use a TIFF or whatever other formats you enjoy. Going back to Maya, select whatever you want to be lit up using this mask. Go to its material, and I should give it a better name, such as play field texture. Going under emission, for the color, get a file, and that file will be this mask with the colored areas and increasing the weight. You can see them light up in the viewport. That's going to look so fun. I'm going to set it down to 0.5, and let's take a look. Going back to Photoshop, you want to hide these. You just click on them and deselect them, and then resave out the file. File, export, save for web legacy, save, overwrite the name of it. Going back to your file input area, click on reload. Now if you just wanted the spots in the center to be lit, these white circles, all you would have to do is edit that Photoshop mask. In Photoshop, I'm going to select this object and create a new smart object via copy. Let me edit this new one. Click, click. You could also use painting tools in Photoshop. You can make a new mask layer above it. Since I use smart objects, that's the way I'm going to do this one. I'm deleting everything around. Let's say this and this. And let's just make these two highlight in color. If not those two, if it's just the center, just that one. That should be easy to do. I save the file, quitting out of Illustrator. Zooming in, and I'm dragging the circles to the same spot. Just position them. Once it's positioned, you can select the smart object and just turn it off. And I'll do that for the other targets here. You could select that target and turn it off as well. Let's look at just these two. File, export, and save it again. I'm going to overwrite the previous one. Going back to Maya. Click on reload. Now just these targets, I haven't done these two, are lining up here. Dragging this circle using the Option key. It's a little bigger. Just scale it into position. And the final two targets, Option key, drag, nudge it, and Option key, drag again, and then turn off that target, and this one. You could put them in any color you want. Since it was this color on the original image, I'm going to stick with that. File, export, and save scene in like for web. Save, replace, and then reload it. You can see in the dark areas, it's lighting up. Click on the original material, going under the weight, and set it higher, maybe 0.9. Hope you enjoyed learning a lot more about lights and how point lights, spotlight, look through the spotlight so you can position it, how to use the light linking relationship editor so a spotlight or any light could just focus on one particular object or a few different selected objects and not light up the rest of the board to bring focus to an object in your scene. And the final one is using emissions to light up particular areas by using a light mask for emissions. If I want to change the color of, let's say these two, let's do this one. Make this instead of white, green or red. Go to Layers, Layer Styles, and choose Color Overlay. Pick a color. Say this brilliant green. File and export it again. And to Maya, follow the input for that color, hit reload.